Hey, witches!
Yeah, hello. Welcome back to another episode of History.
History! We
History.
are still working our way through Marian Gibson's book. Wait, oh my god, excuse me. That was horrendous. Witchcraft, History in 13 Trials. Guys, when I say I can't recommend this book enough, I truly can't, because it's written like anecdotally, so it's true history, and it's like got sources and everything, footnotes, like all of it, but it's written like a short story, and it's funny. It's like some of the jokes that I make when reading this, or when like presenting this to you guys, are not my jokes. They're from the book. So just there you go.
Hey, at least you're like honest with it though. You could be just like, they're mine.
They're my jokes.
I made them.
But we're on chapter 4 now of this book, and we are at the trial of Joan Wright, Practical Magic and America's First Witch. It's not got anything to do with the movie Practical Magic, so
I
don't
was
get
like,
excited.
the movie?
No.
Speaking of practical magic though, I was looking through the little library that we have at work the other day, and I saw the actual practical magic book, and I was like,
I've read it. It's good. I've read the whole series. It's good. It's good. It's good stuff. Good book. I like it. But this is before Salem. So it goes through this really long story that I'm not going to necessarily bore you with. But basically, Thomas Jefferson had a fuck ton of like papers and records and shit that nobody really knows why he had them. But one of those was a record of court cases in Virginia's General Court in the 1620s. So in the 1620s is when this happened. But like a lot of the time when you say the witch trials, people are like Salem. Like that's the first thing you go to, especially in America. Maybe not in other countries, because you're going to have your own horrific witch trials that are more prevalent. But not as many people know about the witch hunt that went on before that. About 70 years earlier than Salem, and about 600 miles south in Jamestown, Virginia, where Joan Wright was charged with using witchcraft in the 1626. So Joan Wright was born in England, in Kingston upon Hull, sometime between 1580 and 1590. Her actual birthday is not, there's no official record of her birthday. So colonists set out from there and other English ports to make a better life in America. Like that was the dream, right? But that is not how Joan's story turns out. So when she's younger, she's a housemaid in an English dairy. And she happens to be a servant in the household of a superstitious woman. So her job, she's basically a milkmaid, right? Like she is working in the dairy with the cows, processing the milk into butter and cheese. So this explains what exactly a butter churn is, in case you don't know, because this is important to the story. So a butter churn is a conical wooden barrel with a vertical plunger or staff inside. Remember that, it will be important later. So in the days before refrigeration, milk curdled easily, and if the milk curdled, it would not turn into butter, no matter how much you churn it. It just wouldn't happen. So a lot of the time, because, anything that went wrong in those days, it was witchcraft. So they would say that witches had cursed their butter churns, when really it was just because it was hot and the milk curdled. So Joan's
And boy,
employer,
let
which
me tell you, it's hot.
yeah, Joan's employer, I don't think we ever get her name. But there is a visitor that comes to their house, and her name is Annie Sampson. And um, the employer decides she is going to trap this witch. So um, they call her the Dame, the employer. So I'm going to call her the Dame from here on out to make less confusion. So the Dame tells Joan to clap the churn staff to the bottom of the churn and clap her hands across on the top of it and hold it down with both hands. So she does this. So she's like standing here like this, holding the churn down into the, or the plunger down into the churn. And she basically just stands there and waits to find out what the Dame is going to tell her to do next. And she's like, don't move, keep that push down into the bottom of the churn, and walks out the door. And Joan is like, what the fuck? But hey, I don't have to churn, I can just stand here. Fuck yeah, I'm gonna do that. So turns out this was like a counter spell towards the other girl to catch the witch and make her confess and remove her evil spell. So the witch, which is Annie Sampson, said her hand was in the churn and she could not move until Joan lifted up the staff so she could move. Once Joan let go of the staff, the witch left. So this is the beginning of her witchcraft journey. Even though it wasn't her spell, it was her employer's spell, but whatever. Later in her life, she tells this story when she has already moved to America. She's telling her neighbors about this story along with a second story. And these are going to haunt her later. So the second story is she's told to wait for this woman to come to the door, and when the woman arrives, she has to seize a horseshoe that she had in the kitchen, fling it into the oven. Once the horseshoe turns red hot, she's supposed to use it in a charm against witchcraft.
I feel like they're doing witchcraft just like.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. So she's supposed to take the red hot horseshoe out of the oven, fling it into a pot of her dame's urine, and as long as the horseshoe stayed hot, the witch would be sick at heart. So this all happened because the dame thought that she was cursed, and so she was not feeling well. And after she does all of this, it works, and her employer feels better. Probably because she was fucking sick and she recovered, not because she was cursed, but that's what they believed then. So she also tells this story to her new American neighbors. After that story happened, before she tells it to her neighbors, but after it happened, she goes to America. By 1610, she arrives in Virginia and she marries a tobacco planter named Robert Wright and Sawyer, which apparently is like a carpenter kind of, I think. And then she has 2 kids. So basically, she has done her duty as a woman. She got married, she had kids. Done, right? But they're not like the colonies, first of all, are not doing so hot at this point in time. And Joan and Robert are not well to do by any means. In mid 1620s, they live in Elizabeth City, and they live in a house with another family who own a vineyard. Joan is working medically and spiritually as a midwife and a fortune teller. And Robert is building forts and clearing new land. So they're both working. They, like I said, they don't have a lot, but they are both like faithful that this is going to turn out well. Everything's going to be okay because they're both hard workers and they don't give up on stuff like that. There are, so this Elizabeth City and Jamestown are fairly close together, and they are considered densely populated with over 1,300 people. That's a small town these days. But then that was like big. And these people were all survivors of not only famine, but Native American attacks and an epidemic. And when I say Native American attacks, I mean Native Americans defending their land and their home, just so we're clear. But they still ended up killing a lot of people. And then an epidemic because, you know, they're in a whole new world with whole new diseases. So over 3,000 colonists have died at this point. Then we jump to 1623. Partly because of external threats being not only the Native Americans and weather, but also we're starting to see like the Spanish coming in and some of the other colonists from other areas. Jamestown is running low on food. Another epidemic spreads. Lots of people are dying. So they get a new governor because that's going to fix everything, right? And he is like, we are going to have a tight grip on this colony. We're going to stockpile weapons. We're going to have a military. We're going to drill this military. You're going to mandated daily prayer. They have to be Protestant. And their private lives are no longer private. Several women at this point in time are prosecuted for drunkenness, whoredom, and adultery. And Joan, with her medical and magical work, being a fortune teller, she's kind of in the danger zone. Yeah. So King James of England is very interested in demonology because he is the same King James of Scotland. Same guy. But he comes out with this law, basically, that bans, quote, any invocation or conjuration of any evil and wicked spirit, unquote. And then any further interaction with spirits. So no one can in any way be involved with spirits. They can't entertain it, employ it, feed, nothing. No evil spirits. This is called the Witchcraft Act. So that came out 3 decades ago at this point. And we're thousands of miles away on an entirely different continent. But Joan is going to be tried under this law. The difference here, though, is where in the North Berwick trials, demonology played like a huge part. The Virginians did not care much about demonology. They were more practical. The first thing that happened was military men came forward to accuse Joan Wright in September 1626. So, the Native Americans are attacking, there's financial collapse, all these crazy things are happening, and the men are like, I think it's the witches. I think all of this is because of the witches. And if we get rid of the witches, God is going to smile on us. So that's what we're going to do. So Lieutenant Giles Ellington comes out to make statements about not only her, but also himself, and says that he and his fellow officers, his fellow military officers, have had poor hunting luck lately. There's not very much animals to shoot at, and even when there are animals to shoot at, they're just not able to hit anything, and that's because of witchcraft, not because they suck. So this new guy, or their best example, not this new guy, one of their friends, Sergeant Reynold Booth, has been in Virginia since 1609. He's very knowledgeable about the local area. He knows the woods around there. And he should have no problem hunting and gathering food for them. So when he comes along and is like trying to help and they still can't catch anything, it's clearly witchcraft. Clearly. No question. However, Giles also has some personal concerns about Joan because his wife was pregnant, and that's a hard enough thing and dangerous enough in England at this point in time, let alone in the colonies where there are less experienced doctors, less everything. So when the when his wife is pregnant, he hears about a negligence case where a physician, Dr. John Pott, failed to feed an expectant mother meat and caused her miscarriage, supposedly, allegedly. Because they're so worried about growing the population in the New World, there's a lot of sensitivity around childbirth. So any kind of miscarriage or care of pregnant women is a big problem. So he very carefully selected his midwife, which was Joan, who had a good reputation for medical skills. But when he told his wife, she was like, no. Joan is left-handed. Left-handed people are evil. No, she can't be my midwife. So he then has to be like, ooh, sorry, Joan, you can't actually have the job, even though I already offered it to you. But instead of telling her that and just being upfront about it, he ghosted her. So,
Nice.
She got a little mad. She was like, what the fuck, bro? And when she finally heard the reasoning why, she was extra pissed. So she happened to find out the day after the baby's birth, and she shows up at their house, and is super pissed. Like, she's mad about it. So, she doesn't say anything though. In all of the other chapters, they say something that's really damning, right? She doesn't. She's just upset, and she leaves. So, not too long after that, Giles's wife falls ill with an abscess on her breast. She recovers. Yeah, but she recovers.
Oh, never mind.
And then Giles gets sick. And then their baby gets sick and dies at 4 months old. Yeah. Which, honestly, for the time in the colonies, wasn't that big of a surprise. But it's still devastating. And, witchcraft. He was like, my baby died because Joan Wright is a witch. She tells fortunes. She has a lot of predictions that predict death, which, again, is not a hard leap to make in colonial America. People died from everything. But she made a lot of predictions about death. And then she told her neighbors about the 2 previous incidents before she left England. So and then right before, not too long before she's accused of witchcraft, Alice Bailey says or alleges that she asked Joan whether her husband would bury her or she would bury him, but Joan refuses to answer. But she says, I can tell you if I would, but I am exclaimed against for such things, accused of witchcraft because of such predictions, and I'll tell no more. So she basically is like, I could tell you, but I won't because everybody keeps calling me a witch. Fuck you.
That's how you do it.
Yeah. So then they decide, because of everything that's going on, to relocate. So they move, not too far, but they move to a different, like, colony, I guess, called Paces Pains. But they are not welcome here. Their new neighbor is Daniel Watkins, and he's like, no, she's not good. She was being rude to the farmer because he was supposed to, so he says he's going to give a gift of chickens to this orphan girl, but instead he has the chickens like penned up so she can't have them. And Joan is basically like, what the fuck, bro? And because of that, she's not welcome in town. There's just a lot of different things, and they're all petty like that. Then in this town is when she tells her neighbors about the two stories about her encounters with witchcraft back in England. Almost immediately, someone's like, get the magistrate, and she's accused of being a witch. The men all assemble to hear her case because, a jury of your peers in those times meant white men, regardless of who you were, whether those were your peers or not. So they assembled on September 11th, 1626, where the governor, Sir George Yeardley, Captain Francis West, who would be governor next, and Dr. John Pott, who was governor after that, were on this jury, or were the judges with this jury. There was no jury. These were the panel of judges deciding her case because military rule was in operation. Interestingly, no churchmen were involved, and no demonological concerns are mentioned in the trial paperwork, at least the surviving trial paperwork. But Joan's witch trial was framed as a practical exercise in dealing with material matters, such as threats to the colony's food supply and lives and security of colonists. So this put her in a good position because it wasn't bringing demonology into it. And the law here did not allow torture. So she wasn't tortured until she confessed to satanic visions or anything like that. She didn't have a lawyer, but her husband was allowed to speak for her. He had been married to his wife for 16 years at this point. And he didn't know, he said there was nothing to do with these crimes. Like, this was not fact. Unfortunately, there was no record of what she said at her trial. The records don't even record whether she pled guilty or not guilty. But Isabella Perry was one of the neighbors in the town, and she asked Joan why she didn't sue her accuser for slander. She was like, if thou knowest thyself clear of what she charged thee, why dost thou not complain and clear thyself of the same? So she's basically like, if you know you didn't do it, why aren't you accusing them of slander? Like, what's going on? And Joan just kind of like calmly looks at her and says, God forgive them, and walks off. But that simple statement might have saved her because she was not immediately judged a danger, and her case was adjourned till the next court sitting, which would be 7 days later, where 2 additional witnesses confirm the stories that have been told about her, but no verdict is recorded. So that's where the record ends. We don't know.
Is she alive or is she dead?
We don't know. We don't know. There's no further record of her, but there's also no record that she was executed or even convicted. However, history being what it was at the time, historians tend to believe that she was not convicted, or if she was convicted, she was given a light punishment, because at the time, potential wives and mothers were not plentiful. So executing a young woman who was still in the childbirthing years would have been wasteful.
Catastrophic.
Yeah, it would have been considered wasteful. So they cared more about her womb and her potential use to the colony than they did about her supposed witchcraft. Allegedly. We don't know for sure that that's what happened. But she probably survived and was acquitted and given a lesser sentence. But even with that, the consequences of her trial were still big, because we do have record that after that they had the Wright family had to leave their home and their businesses suffered. So on January 13th, 1627, which is a few months later, Robert Wright petitioned the court to be allowed to move back across the James River to Jamestown. The court agreed, and he was given 12 acres to the east of Jamestown to build a house beside a marsh. However, this particular land was literally named labor in vain because of the quality of the land. They weren't going to be able to farm it or do much with it. But Robert Wright, being the practical, industrious man that he was, joined with a friend, basically, and they took a 10-year lease on a joiner's yard, which I forgot to look up what that is.
I got you.
A joiner's yard in Jamestown. But their life still wasn't easy. Eventually, Robert is arrested for debt. Is it something to do with tobacco?
A joinery is a workshop where joiners create and assemble wood products for buildings such as furniture, doors, wood.
Oh, okay. That makes sense, because he was like a lumberjack basically before. So on January 14th, 1628, so about a year later, he is arrested for a debt of 1,200 pounds of tobacco. And then on March 2nd, he is imprisoned for 2 separate debts. So basically, because of this witch hunt, their reputations were damaged and their whole lives were changed, and for the worse, because of this. So even though she probably wasn't murdered for it, it still severely affected her family and their future in America.
Yeah.
So I think the next chapter is about Salem, if I remember right. Oh, no, it's not. Just kidding. It's during the Civil War. But it'll be interesting.
Yeah. Well, there's your history lesson for the day.
There it is. It was a quick one.
Yeah. All right. Until next time.
Bye.